Hey guys, it's Dr. Hayes, and I wanted to make a little video to talk about Chapter 6, your reading for this week. And I wanted to just kind of go through a few things from Chapter 6 and what your assignment's going to be, the exercise at the end, and sort of preview the next paper, the last big assignment we're working on. We'll talk about this more in person on Thursday in Discord, but I wanted to make a little video for maybe people to watch ahead of time, or if you can't come to the Discord discussion. So the chapter we're reading, chapter 6, and They Say, I Say, is Skeptics May Object, Planting a Naysayer in Your Text. So this is purposefully putting a voice in your text of someone who disagrees with your point of view. And that might seem counterintuitive, but it actually strengthens your overall position. And so we'll talk about that. You might have noticed that last week we did chapters 7 and 8, and now we're going back to chapter 6. I did that on purpose because I thought that it would make a little bit more logical sense to get your entire paper sort of planned out, and the so what, and I'll plan at the end. And then maybe the last thing you can think about is going in and adding a naysayer in the text. So they talk about planting a naysayer. A naysayer is somebody who says the opposite of what you're saying, or says something negative about what you're saying. A little bit more of an official word that I don't know that they ever use is counterarguing. Okay, so counterarguing is the persuasive technique of including the other side in your argument. Acknowledging there is another perspective, or more than one. There's an alternate or an objecting perspective to your position, and going ahead and taking the opportunity to say what you would say if there was someone right there in person debating you and countering your position. So counter-arguing, as laid out in the chapter, has two steps. One, anticipating the objection that someone might have to your point of view, and then answering that objection. So it's just like if you were having a debate in person, like I said a minute ago. If you're having a debate in person and someone said, well, hold on, surely you missed the point that XYZ is the case. Or, I don't know if you're reading Jones quite correctly there. I seem to think that he's meaning this instead. Or, I don't know if your findings 100% support what you're trying to suggest. What about fill in the blank, right? So you're anticipating, step one, you're anticipating what those objections might be. You're anticipating what someone might say if they were given a chance to argue with you. And you go ahead and acknowledge what their position might be and put it in your essay, and then you have a chance to reply before anybody has a chance to object. So some people are self-conscious about counter-arguing because they think it might say, "Oh, I'm showing my hand. I'm letting people know the problems that somebody might have with my argument." Well, yeah, it seems sort of vulnerable at first, but really it will make your argument stronger because you're being open about the fact that, hey, there are multiple points of view about this subject, and I think mine is the most valid because, right? So you're able to then, it just gives you an excuse to offer even more support and more evidence for your topic. And a lot of times students find that it's easier to make their paper long enough according to the assignment or whatever if they include some counter-arguing, if they plant a naysayer, as They Say, I Say says. It gives them somebody to talk to in the essay. It gives you somebody to reply to, and like an idea to counter. We talked about this when we were talking about incorporating sources into your text. Sometimes it's easier if you incorporate a source of somebody who you disagree with rather than someone who you agree with, because you have more to say to the person who you disagree with. Well, this is a similar situation. counter arguing in your essay. So I was going to go through some of the things from the chapter, and just like I did last week, I have taken some pictures of the templates from this chapter, and I'm going to upload them onto Canvas so you can see the templates for how to counter arguing, how to address objections in your essay. So I'm going to put some pictures of the counter arguing templates and a picture, it's actually 2 pictures, of the exercise at the end of the chapter that you have to do for your reading response number 14. So that, in case you don't have a book at home or for whatever reason, you can at least do the reading response, because I don't think you really need much of the having the chapter helps, because you're supposed to write a counter arguing paragraph for this passage they provide you. So if you have the chapter and you have the templates, it helps, but it's not 100% necessary, since I'm including pictures of the templates as well. So the first step, anticipate objections. So there's a few ways to go about this. They give you the example of, you can do it sort of formally, to where you're like, at this point, I would like to address some objections to my thesis, right? Like, you can do it a little bit formally like that. Or you can do it more like dialogue, like, but that doesn't make sense, some of my objectors might say. Like, and you can put it in dialogue, right? They give you some examples in the chapter of pieces of writing where people have done that, where they actually personify and give a voice to a made-up opponent to their point of view. There's a great cartoon here on page 80. I'm going to try to show it. See if you can see it. I'll read it to you, but in the top picture, she's upset, like, oh man. And then in the bottom picture, she's figured it out. So in the top picture, it says, oh no, they're going to say that I've misrepresented X's work or Jones's work. And then she's upset. But then she realizes, oh, that's actually good. If I think they're going to say that, I can address that in my paper. And so the quote she actually puts in her paper is, you will probably object that I have misrepresented X's work here. And I concede or agree that X never says blank in so many words. Nevertheless, and she's able to keep going and explain herself and to defend why she's interpreting Jones or X in the way that she did. So she's anticipating an objection, and she actually incorporates it into the text of her essay. So you have some templates here. Like I said, I'm not going to read all the templates to you because I'm going to put pictures of them on Canvas. But there's lots of different ways that you can do this. One is where you can be sort of general, where you might say, some readers might wonder why I didn't say this, or many might object because of blank, right? You would say, skeptical scholars have noted blank. You can keep it like just a general group of people. Some readers, many people, that kind of a thing. But your book does say, if you can identify a specific group that you anticipate will disagree with your point of view, that's even better. For example, say that you're writing the paper like Tilda did about veganism. You can say something like, meat lovers will argue and say that you can't get enough protein from being vegan. And then you can address that, right? So they give you some examples here, some templates that use actual groups. They use, many feminists would probably object that XYZ. Social Darwinists, biologists, of course, may want to question whether blank. So that, you can give a group. It doesn't have to be like a formal group like PETA or something. You're not representing somebody's official stance, but you're picking out a group of people, like scientists or college professors will tell you XYZ. But however, some people disagree, that kind of thing. And so that, that's a little bit more credible in your paper if you can identify an actual group who you can just predict that their general response to your topic will be to object, and what specifically will they object to, and then you can reply. So yeah, you have a few ideas for how to incorporate objections, anticipate objections in your paper, both formally and informally, generally and more specifically. They also give you some, if you want to frame it in the form of a question, where you could say, but is my thesis, is this realistic? Is what I'm suggesting valid even? You could say, is it necessarily true that blank? Maybe is it always the case what I'm saying is better? Right? You can kind of form a question and then answer your own question. And that's a form of counter-arguing. Like, you are anticipating that someone is not convinced, and you're giving voice to that person who's not convinced in your essay, and then answering that question to further convince them. So yeah, it's kind of it's a technique that you can use to sort of take the power back from someone who might argue with you in your essay. The one tip they do give, or just the reminder they give you about anticipating objections, is when you represent that there's an opposing view in your paper, you want to represent them accurately and fairly. Don't just say, don't set them up as like idiotic. Like, some obviously uneducated people will disagree because blah, blah, blah. You don't want to negatively or inaccurately represent or invalidate the position of the other side. That just makes you look bad. That just makes you look sore. It doesn't make you look like a credible scholar. So just be sure you're fair and mature about the way that you represent the other side of your position. Moving on to the second step, answering objections. This is not quite as involved because you've already been doing this all along in your paper. But there might be evidence or points that you're going to make that you specifically save for this counter-arguing section. That, is this really the true all the time? And you can answer it, well, it's true that there are probably some circumstances where this does not apply, but as my research has shown, this is the case for the majority of participants. That kind of a thing. You can answer that, and it just sort of strengthens your point. So when you're answering the objection that you brought up, the one thing you don't want to do, the way to answer it is to just give more support. Maybe even introduce another source, and maybe, like I said, save some information back. But there's definitely something you don't want to do with answering your objections and your counter-arguing is, don't just dismiss them outright. So some people will say that this is not a valid way to look at this topic. Well, they're obviously wrong. Moving on. That's not how you address that. You don't say, oh, they're just, obviously they're wrong. Well, you might say, I disagree with them because, and give a reason. But usually what you want to do is acknowledge what about their perspective is possibly valid, but then either add to it or sort of reject part of it. So you're saying, yes, I guess they have a point, but I would also add such and such. Or you might say, part of their concerns are admittedly valid, and I can admit that. However, but the majority of what they're saying has been disproven by the research I've done. That kind of a thing. So the whole point is to be gracious about it. It makes you look good. It makes you look like you know your stuff, so to speak, if you can sort of graciously acknowledge that there's another side, represent them fairly and accurately, and then answer their concerns with more knowledge on your part about your topic. That's really all that it is. So where you would put this counter-arguing section, traditionally you would put a counter-arguing paragraph at the end of the body, like like before you go into your final conclusion. So, just to review 101, essays have 3 parts: introduction, body, conclusion. You need all 3 parts to have a solid, complete essay. I made that comment on some people's essay for the informative, like, "Ooh, you don't have a conclusion. You need a conclusion paragraph. You can't just end with your last point." So make sure you have all your parts. So part of the body of a persuasive essay is supporting the claim you've made in the introduction. So in a persuasive paper, you're making a claim. In the introduction, it's like, here's a situation that exists. Here's an issue. Here's a little bit of the background. Here's my stance and the claim I'm making. Either that this is true, this is false, this is what we should be doing, this is a policy that should change, etc. You're making some sort of a claim in the beginning. Then your body of your essay is endeavoring to support and defend the claim you're making with research and emotional appeals and logic. And so you are, kind of building your case. Well, one of the elements of the body of your essay is your counter-arguing. So once you've presented all your evidence, then before you are ready to fully conclude your essay, put in this, however, I know not everybody's going to agree, and this is what I would say to them, right? And you put a paragraph for counter-arguing before your conclusion. However, I have seen some people sort of spread their counter-arguing throughout the essay, where each point they make, they acknowledge what the opposition to that specific point would be, and then answer it, and then move on to the next point and acknowledge what the opposition would be, and then answer it, and then move on. That might be a little bit more of a complicated structure for you to manage and juggle. If some of you might find it easier to do it that way, but I definitely want all of you in your final paper to sort of acknowledge the opposition, to do some counter-arguing of some kind, whether it's a paragraph before you get to your conclusion, or if it's spread through. I should be able to identify where you're doing this counter-arguing throughout your paper. We can talk some more about the elements of a persuasive paper. Eventually, I want to go over the rhetorical triangle with you, just as a review of that. We'll save that for another time. But for now, you have exercise 1 at the end of the chapter. I've taken pictures of it and put it on Canvas, as I said earlier. But they've given you a whole sort of writing sample here, 3 paragraphs, it looks like. And it's a bit of a little persuasive piece. And this person, Eric Schlosser, he does not do any counter-arguing. So your assignment is to write a counter-arguing paragraph for him based on the paragraphs he's already written, and the claim he's making, and the evidence and reasons he's giving. You need to write a counter-arguing paragraph for him. So what that means is you need to predict who might oppose his point of view. Who might that be? And then introduce that opposition into a paragraph and then answer it. You can use the templates in the book. Use some of the templates for introducing an opposition, introducing another side. So you'll need to figure out who you think would oppose his claim and his evidence. Who would oppose it, and what would their main reason for opposing it be? Set up a paragraph that way, and then as Eric Schlosser, answer that opposition. So just practice writing a counter-arguing paragraph as if you were going to insert a counter-arguing paragraph in this essay, in this writing sample. Okay, so that's your assignment. We can talk about it live in Discord just to make sure everybody kind of got the point and understood what to do. But yeah, so, and in the meantime, if you have questions about it, obviously get in touch. Let me know if you have questions. Don't just not do it because you're confused. But yeah, so that's chapter 6. That's the all about counter arguing and what you need to know for Thursday. We'll talk more about the requirements of the paper and how to go about that, and talk about this exercise when we get live in Discord on Thursday. Okay, I'll see you guys then.